whatever. But if I had time, I'd play the songs for you. But I can just show you a little bit about how he describes it in this song, Place in This World. He says, I'm looking for a reason, roaming through the night to find my place in this world. If there are millions down on their knees, among the many, can you still hear me? Where do I belong? And that's pretty much the feel of this theological world. All right, World 2, Conflict and Vindication. Of course, Van Gogh's sappers there that evoke a little feeling of frenzy and conflict. And that's the feeling of this world, is that there's conflict everywhere, and conflict is at the heart of everything. I wanted to say, maybe bring about some particular denominations that may model particular worlds. And for world number 1, I thought of maybe Episcopalian churches that really emphasize rituals, or maybe even the Unitarian church that talks about the unity of religions. And of course, we talked about Eastern religions. Those are some that came to my mind. And of course, you will find people of every world in all the different churches, but those are just churches that seem to model that a little bit more. For world number 2, the human problem is oppression and chaos, and history is experienced as chaotic. The world seems to thrive on conflict. Wherever one turns, there is a drama of winners and losers everywhere. We're caught in this evil system. There's no way to get out. We're caught in the destructive pattern of system inside and out. We are products of the violence throughout. There's inequality, there's injustice everywhere. They permeate reality. There's no way to turn. And you may see how this may be expressed by a lot of some minority groups who have been under significant oppression and may experience life this way. Death then is viewed as the final enemy. There will be change or protest as long as one lives. In the world number 1, there's a change in perspective when that primal yearning has to be resolved. The way that is resolved is internally through a change in perspective. You start to feel part of something larger than yourself. You feel unified. In this world, the only change that is possible is a change of reality. We have got to change the way things are. So there's a feeling of being driven to reform. The only hope is if the future is significantly different. There's a feeling that we should never resign to how things are. We need to resist it. We need to change history. Have you all seen the interview with Patrick Swayze a couple months ago with Barbara Walters? I was struck by how he described his cancer diagnosis, and it was very much on these terms. Cancer, you're trying to beat me down. Doctors are trying to tell me I'm not going to live, but you watch me. I'm going to fight this. And even he talked about how his guardian angels were really warriors on his behalf. And he talked about winning is never giving up. And that is the feel of this world. You don't give up. God is on the side of the oppressed. If anybody has heard of liberation theology, which says basically that's where it's coming from, this feeling of a warrior in the midst of oppression. There is commitment to the cost of discipleship. They may experience some self-neglect and some self-righteousness with this, but there is an emphasis on activism. They're going to get things done and change things. This may be, the patient who really seeks aggressive treatment and may come to hospice at the very last minute, or it may be the hospice patient who really fights death to the very end. And we had a patient who we had conversations back and forth about him receiving blood transfusions and just doing whatever he could to beat death as long as he could. And that's where he's coming from. The essential question for the people in this world is, what can be done? What can be done about this? General feeling is that of anger and the identity of a warrior. Now, if they are living on the rhythm, on the basic needs side, on the obsessio side, they may be victimized, I guess, by that anger, but if they're on the other side, they may use that anger in constructive ways, and they may be raging with God or at God. And that's something to consider. If they are raging with God, then God must be on their side and on the side of the oppressed. Sin here is external evil disrupting relation. And they tend to have a strong social conscience because they know just how much people have been oppressed in the world. A lot of intercessory prayer, they contend with God through dialogue, and they're very concrete in their prayers, and they like people to pray for them in concrete ways. They have difficulty enjoying life because they focus more on doing than being. So for somebody who is a fighter to be confined to a bed and not be able to do much, that would be very hard. Resolution is rooted in the vision of a new heaven, new earth, or liberation within history. Again, the changing of reality. They are never satisfied with what is, and resolving that leads to promise, vision, commitment, and focus. And something that they would like to have said about them at their funeral would be, they have fought the good fight. They fought as long as they lived. First, you can see a lot of this world described in a lot of gospel music, because a lot of black churches and Hispanic churches have that dominant feeling. And so this is a gospel song called Stand Out. And I couldn't even put the whole song on here, but you can see it very clearly. Be not conformed to this world, be transformed. The war, it's in disguise, no time for compromise. There's a lot of black and white feeling in this world is very common. So here it is, no time for mixing light with darkness, be black or white, no more shades of gray. There's a war going on and we will win. And that's very powerful. I grew up in my churches in Brazil. This was everywhere because Protestant churches, for one thing, a lot of the lower socioeconomic class, a lot of the Protestant Christians in Brazil are lower on the socioeconomic scale and also are a religious minority in Brazil. So there was a lot of this fight stance. There's World 3, quite a contrast. By the way, he says, John says, that this explains why with some people you're really quick and you really click and you get them and you feel like, oh, I know how they are wired, I know how they think. It's because you probably share the same world or a similar world. And with some people you feel like you're worlds apart, like you're living in a different world, you don't understand where they're coming from. And in his assessment, there's actually, you can rank the worlds, which one is the most dominant for you, which one is the fifth dominant for you. And so this one and the next one tend to clash a little. We'll get into that. So that's World 3, Emptiness and Fulfillment. And that's Renoir, I believe. Yes. And the intent of this picture is to show the intrinsic beauty of nature and the intrinsic beauty of human beings. Characteristics. The human problem for people in this world is self-estrangement or lost potential. Feeling like the self is unfulfilled, that there are possibilities all around us and we're not reaching our whole potential, so there's maybe an aching void. The mystery of living is growth, expansiveness, and fulfillment, and so there's a lot of emphasis on self-realization and growing and expanding. The weight of this is a lack of self-confidence due to an emphasis in the unfulfilled self and awareness of possibilities, because you know just how much you could do and you could be, and that leads to a lot of tension inside. People in this world are very aware of all the options that they have and all that they could do and be, and know that saying yes to one thing means saying no to everything else, and so that creates a lot of self-doubt and a lot of worry about, am I choosing the right thing and the best thing, and what about all the other options I haven't considered and haven't gone through, and one life just feels like not enough. There's just too much they want to do. The sin here is of omission. It's not, they don't have a whole lot of guilt about what they've done. It's about what they have not done and not accomplished, and it's not venturing in relation with other people. Focus is on self-discovery, self-growth, and self-risk. Death here is part of life's process. And this is really an internal problem. They're not worried so much that people think less of them or don't understand them so much as themselves. I know there's a problem with me here. And yes, there's a wanting to be accepted by other people. But the problem here really is that in trying to be accepted, I'm trying to be who they want me to be, and now I'm not being myself. The problem is that I know I'm not being myself. So it's that internal tension. There's a lot of focus on integration of body and mind, tendency to overlook negative impact of systems. For some, this world comes out of a situation such as divorce or an unemployed self or forced time alone. And for hospice patients, you could see how that could work, because there's not a whole lot that you can do when you're confined to your own house or your own bed but think. And he also says a lot of privileged classes may have this dominant world too. There's a general feeling of being invisible and bypassed, like life is passing you by. And often there's an activity born out of boredom, more and more, adding up to less and less. And it's similar to World 1 in that feeling invisible, but this is not really about the cosmos. It's more about me. In World 1, he says people feel like they're an outcast because they've been cast out and separated. In this world, they're an outcast because there's nothing there to begin with. And fear of being forgotten, which may also resonate with hospice patients anyway, but especially if they live in this world. And regret centered on time being too short. So some spiritual needs and resources. Essential question here is, who am I? Which I think I may have done the first question. I think the first question should be, where am I? And this one, who am I? The general feeling is an ache or a void, an identity of an outcast. Evil here is squandering life's potential. You know, for this world, there's not a debt to be paid, there's a waste to be acknowledged. And that's what really grips them. It's not a feeling of guilt, it's a feeling of regret or sorrow. They have a healthy regard for vitality, for deep sharing, for living. God is experienced as present. For Christians, there's a lot of emphasis on the humanity of Jesus. Prayer is meditation. Story is deeply appreciated, and a tendency to identify success with personal effort. So, if for this world, if you're going to talk about winners or losers, they might see winners as the one who have tried enough, and the losers have not. So that can come, to their aid or not, or can work against them. They feel a call to live, to being their own person, exploring, dreaming, experiencing, failing, trying, with, again, that focus on self-discovery. Resolution of salvation entails being set free, being awakened to one's possibilities, usually with the support and promise of a caring friend or group, and it leads to feeling like you belong, assertiveness, and self-realization. With the comforting words of funeral being, they will not be forgotten, and being a celebration of their life, which is what they really want. One group that came to my mind when I was thinking about this that would model this world would be maybe the Quakers, with their emphasis on the light within and sharing, or any intimate settings of worship where sharing is encouraged and worship is more of a family event. Nicole Nordeman is one that I think her songs really demonstrate that world, and this is one of them called Legacy. And she says, I want to leave a legacy. How will they remember me? Did I do enough to make a mark on things? And that's that feeling of wanting to be remembered. Okay, so this is World 4, where the rhythms are condemnation and forgiveness. And this is a Ruaut. Ruaut, am I saying that right? I'm a World 3 person. I have self-doubts. Condemnation and forgiveness. This world kind of clashes with World 3 a lot because the feeling here is guilt, in that it's also an internal problem, but the internal problem is that the self is, there is some evil in the self to begin with. And this picture shows how this person is just eaten up from within, struggling with that guilt. So the human problem for World 4 is powerless to temptation and just falling short. It centers on the power of the demonic upon one's will, and there is a longing to be pure, perfect, and innocent. Now, sin here is desecration of relation. It's not just something, for instance, in World 3 you might describe sin as missing the mark. But here, when sin is actually willful, it's intentional, and it's chosen. And people who live in this world are very aware of our internal disposition to do wrong. Simply to be is to live at the expense of others. And there is this feeling that the self has a secret soul, and there's no act that is not tainted by pride. They are very aware that everyone has that tendency to mess up. There's a feeling that life is an unending chore, and an emphasis on self-sacrifice. They really value self-sacrifice, where in the other world we're talking about self-realization. So you see how they might clash a little.